First, the overture.
Snow is coming down all over, ice is being created all over the earth, and it's sucking the water into itself all over the place.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. In this video, we're going to watch another creationist make up stories about science in order to deny science because there's no magic in the story of Noah's Ark. This video is like an hour long and it's part 15 of a series. So let's start with this clip and see where it goes. Thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the video and let me know what y'all think in the comments.
We've got ice, much more ice on the planet than we do today, or they did before the flood. Okay, continents covered with ice like this. Now, what is that going to do to the oceans?
Let's take a couple seconds to think about it. Forget everything you know. Forget fourth grade science and say the stupidest thing that comes to mind.
If you take a bowl of water, right, a bowl of water here, and then I went outside and it's snowing out and I made a snowball, and I put that snowball in the water, what's going to happen?
I've always wondered what it would feel like to be the smartest person in the room. You ever been in a snowball fight with someone who thinks it's a rock fight, packs it down into a chunk of ice? Have you ever seen that snow that you can't pack down? You just can't make a snowball out of it. This idiot thinks the ice caps are sponges made of snowflakes.
The snowball is going to suck all the water out of that bowl into itself, okay?
Okay, I'm just gonna go over here for a while.
Lowering the level of the water in the bowl.
Teacher gets a big red F. It's not true. Fresh water is less dense than salt water. When fresh water melts, it actually takes up more space than salt water, raising the level. Put a snowball or an ice cube in fresh water, because it's the same density, it will displace the same volume, no matter how much water it sucks up.
Now imagine this happening worldwide now. Okay, snow is coming down all over, ice is being created all over the earth, and it's sucking the water into itself all over the place. What is that going to do? It's going to lower the levels of the ocean.
Dum 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 dum.
It's like this. Ice caps and glaciers are all made up of fresh water. Ice doesn't wick up water like a snowball, and if it did, it would quickly not be able to overcome the effects of gravity. Also, salt water changes the temperature at which water freezes.
Again, both sides agree that this would have happened. The ice age would have caused the sea level to be lower than it is today.
He does that throughout the video and says evolutionists agree in principle while twisting the science around to fit his creation narrative. So strap yourselves in, let's ride this crazy train into a ravine and just enjoy the wreck.
But I do want you to remember that this idea of Pangea and the breaking apart of the continents was an idea by a creationist. Anyway, he believed that it was the flood that separated the continents.
Any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from science.
And he called it continental sprint.
In 1858, this dude, Tony, built on the already hypothesized idea, noting that the fossils matched up on different continents. And without providing any evidence for a mechanism, he went with Big Flood. 54 years later, Alfred Wagner released his scientific paper with scientific stuff in it, and 20 to 30 years later, people started to take him seriously. But he had his stupid ideas too. Alfred spent years on the ice and died in his tent from hunger after having to eat the sled dogs you should go check out Alfred Wagner's wiki page, because they had these prop-powered jet skis on one expedition, but they ran out of gas and had to go old school. On the last expedition, one dude had to have 3 frostbitten toes cut off with a pocket knife without anesthesia. Another guy, him and his pony fell into a crevasse and he broke his leg. It's insane. Go check it out.
Okay, the evolutionists today also believe that this happened.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
But what do they call it? Continental drift. Everything in evolution takes much longer, okay?
You should be ashamed of yourself. What could have possessed you to be so stupid?
Yeah, this idiot brings up the mid-Atlantic ridge as evidence for nose flood, but forgets to mention magnetic stripping, which is where molten metals retain the magnetic field they're exposed to when they cool down. You see, the evidence actually suggests the continents drifted apart real slow-like, but when you can imagine something, it must be real.
And so they believe this happened, but they just believe it happened over a long, long period of time, millions of years.
I left out a lot there, and it goes like this. Kangaroos hopped to the Middle East, got on a boat, and during that year we went from Pangea to what the Earth looks like today. Dude immediately goes on to say this, and nobody notices its evidence against Noah's famous boat ride.
Just an example here. Can an earthquake actually move a continent quickly?
I'm coming home, Dorothy.
You guys remember the tsunami in Japan back in 2011, where it just massive flooding. And this is just a small tsunami compared to what we're talking about with Noah's flood. Look up some of those videos of the flood and the destruction that it did there in Japan. As a matter of fact, this is what it says. It says, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, the earthquake moved Japan's main island of Honshu eastward by 8 feet in just a few hours. The entire island was moved 8 feet in just a couple hours during this earthquake tsunami, okay? So here's an example of this does not have to be drift. An earthquake moved the entire biggest island of Japan 8 feet over in a matter of hours. We believe that that happened all over the world in a matter of a year, okay?
Armed phasers, fire everything we've got.
Yes, sir.
This idiot admits the devastating power from a small landmass moving about the length of my body, but can't connect the dots when it's all land masses moving at breakneck speeds, would cause global tsunamis moving at the speed of sound and all colliding with each other, would fuck up a wooden boat, and that's not even considering the heat. For some reason, creationists don't want to include God magic because it's not mentioned in the flood story.
One of the creation scientists had an email conversation with his geology professor. This is the conversation here. This is the student. He says, so what caused the Ice Age?
Kikrigi!
Professor.
The cow goes, Shazoo!
The student says,
the monkey goes, Macaque!
You mean you don't know? The professor says,
the elephant goes, Fwamp!
Yeah, kinda.
I mean that there isn't a single scientist or climatologist alive today who knows the answer.
No, it does not.
They may try to give an explanation using position of the Earth, its rotation, distance from the sun, and so on.
I left this in because it's really dumb. Who cares about a conversation between these two idiots? At best, it's poisoning the well, and it doesn't get us anywhere.
Wank!
But the reality is that none of them hold up to any scientific scrutiny.
Wrong, 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 wrong.
Let's take a look at the creationist point of view of how this could have happened, how you could have cool land and warm waters, okay?
Okay, that about wraps up my introduction. Now, are there any questions?
Is the warm oceans not killing all the fish?
The warm oceans probably did kill all the fish.
We're way off in La La Land. This isn't how glaciers are made. Glaciers don't suck up salt water. They're made from compressed ice that gets snowed on. Also, it's the sun that causes evaporation. This is fourth grade science. Also, he's adding in volcanic ash that caused a global blackout. And he says that we agree that this is how it happened. Now, let's make it happen in a year without invoking God magic.
The fountains of the Great Deep erupted here, bringing hot water out of the crust of the earth into the oceans. This greatly warms up the oceans because there is so much water coming out of the earth, okay? There's also volcanoes going off all over the place, which is also causing heat, okay?
The evil I could tolerate, but the stupidity.
Then, so what happens, that naturally causes warmer waters, warmer oceans, okay?
This shit is getting more ridiculous by the second. Global tsunamis, boiling hot water raising the oceans hundreds of feet, volcanic ash blocking out the sun and raining down for over a year, and this one little wooden boat is the only thing left on Earth. Come the fuck on. Also, that ice age lasted for maybe hundreds of years, and this idiot is so dumb that he doesn't know that we're still in the last ice age.
This makes perfect sense that this would work like this, but the reason they refuse to accept this is because
sexual morality.
They don't believe the volcanoes were going off all at one time. They believe it all happened over millions of years, very slowly and gradually, and that this event here never happened.
You all don't seem to understand how serious this is.
So if this event here never happened, then this never happened. And therefore, this never happened. Okay?
Oh, you think it's funny, huh? Okay.
That's actually a cool story, bro, but if all that happened in a year, the Earth would look like this. You're describing an extinction-level event, and because of the boiling oceans and particulate air from the volcanoes, even whales and dolphins would have suffocated. Everything would have died.
It's a perfectly legitimate understanding of how it happened, but if you admit to this, that this happens, that goes right along with what the Bible's talking about, a worldwide flood. Well, we can't have that, okay?
Now, who made Dookie in the urinal?
And so we'll come up with 60 other explanations as to how this thing could have happened. None of those explanations are as good as this one.
Poor shit.
Afraid not.
We could care less if you had evidence for a global flood. It might change the way we think, but this isn't super massive black holes. Dude's really going with...
But we can't have this one because those darn creationists will say, told you so, you know? Any questions on that? Uh-huh.
My question is
The warm oceans probably did kill all the fish. Okay, that's why all over the land, all over the world, you find dead fish, fossils, fossilized fish. So it probably did. The flood probably killed most of the fish in the oceans.
Holy shit. If the flood killed most of the fish, it would have killed all the other life in the ocean too. And no, it didn't have the fish kind on the ark. Where did the vast diversity of ocean life come from, Einstein?
But all you need is a Noah's Ark. You only had 2 of each.
Yeah.
Okay?
And I
So
thought we said last week or before that you didn't need to take any of like the fish or
Exactly. My point is, if you only have 2 horses to bring all the different horses around today.
I'm loving it. Teacher was just called out for his bullshit. She said, last week you said no, it didn't have to take any fish on the ark. And he just said that all the fish died. He cuts her off saying, exactly, horses. Dude realized what he said was stupid. And thankfully, at least there's one idiot in the crowd who can have a coherent thought.
All you need is 2 of each kind of fish, or, a certain amount of fish. Most of them probably did die in the flood.
And even if the Ark had multiphasic shields and it crashed into an actual hellscape, barren of life, covered in mud and ash, boiling hot temperatures, and that's when the only ice age started, it drained the ocean, and that's how the kangaroos hopped to Australia. This shit is retarded, unless you invoke some magic, and for some reason, they don't invoke it. The Mark in the audience asked a great question. It's hard to hear. The question is, does the Bible give a timeline for the Ice Age that creationists can use? The answer is no, of course.
Well, again, just looking at the geology and the natural events that would have happened here, this would have caused the Ice Age to begin towards the end of Noah's flood, and probably last 500 to 700 years.
Dude just pulled that number out of his ass and is telling everybody it's a Snickers bar. We're actually in what's called an interglacial period, and we've been in it since the Bible created the universe.
But again, not a snowball Earth. Life is going on just fine in most of the continents. It's just the upper and lower ends that are much heavier.
This idiot says we evolutionists think the Earth was a frozen snowball during the last glacial maximum, which only covered 25% of the land surface and 8% of the whole Earth, and goes on to say creationists only think 30% of the entire Earth was covered. Dude doesn't care about the truth, and is fucking clueless, to be honest with you.
Just the upper and lower ends that are much heavier. Today, the surface of the Earth is about 10% ice, okay? We believe that back then in the Ice Age, it was maybe 30% ice, 40% at the most. Okay, evolutionists typically say, oh, 90%, you know, almost the whole Earth was a snowball.
Good God! Just knowing we're in the same genus makes me embarrassed to call myself Homo!
Trust me, if you're waiting for him to come up with his evidence for why only 30% of the Earth is covered during the only ice age that lasted 500 years, the day after Noah's flood, you're not going to get it. He doesn't know. He's just shooting from the hip. He's a Texas sharpshooter, so to speak.
Okay, we don't believe that. And I'll show you some evidence for that in a minute.
2,000 years later.
And whom the Great Spirit then directed to build a raft from sassafras logs. After many weeks, a small bird guided the prophet to an island where the Great Spirit changed the bird into a beautiful woman who became his wife, the wife of the prophet, and their children repopulated the world. You can see definitely some changes there, but we still see the core thing happening, a worldwide flood.
Dude seems to think that all the flood legends are originated with La Biblia, even when they are different stories, because they all talk about a boat and people, and sometimes they have birds in them. This shit is just so ridiculous. Some of these stories predate the Bible, but, you know, this dude's actually one hell of a clown. He doesn't think Noah's Ark has been found, but the lost city of Atlantis, it's out there somewhere.
Worldwide flood that God brought upon the world.
In every generation there is a chosen one.
One man who was, you know, a preferred man who got to save the world.
He alone will stand against the vampires.
He makes a big boat made out of sassafras logs and
the demons and the forces of darkness.
And again, even the fact the whole thing here is not correct, but a bird came into the picture and did this. We have at the end of the Noah story a bird, right? And the eagle flies with the dove.
A teacher tells half a dozen flood stories from all over the world. He says they're all apocalyptic stories, and in one of them it comes down to this dude and his sister repopulating the earth, making me wonder about how some of these people reason things.
And again, that was just, you know, this is a warped view of it, but again, the basics are there. The Epic of Gilgamesh, you guys ever heard of that one? This is the most popular non-biblical flood story. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. It is a Babylonian version of it. And again, very similar, But there's definitely differences. It's their God instead of the biblical God, you know, and that they changed the names of the people. One of the things, the cool thing is that
nobody thinks the Epic of Gilgamesh is based on a true story. Also, it was written hundreds, if not thousands of years before Genesis, and I really love how he points out how it makes no sense at all.
The changes that are made in the legends are not viable, but the story in the Bible is viable.
Go back to high school.
Okay, for instance, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the ark is a cube. 120 by 120 by 120 cubits, okay?
Is this wrong? I don't know. It doesn't feel wrong.
Well, a cube in water is just going to roll, okay? It's just going to roll.
Why would it roll? I'm assuming it's watertight. All the shit inside of it is down on that bottom part, lowering the center of gravity, causing it to sink down in the water, and it could possibly be more stable than Noah's boat.
Noah knew the perfect ratio to build a huge boat that's not going to roll, okay?
Sure, man. Finger painting's cool. Go on.
I know it's not a snowball in water, but here's a scaled-down demonstration of Noah's Ark taking on tsunamis, suggesting that a wooden ship made from rough-cut lumber, tree sap, and cow shit is just another idiot playing make-believe who doesn't understand the physics. Even if we give him all of his toys to play with, the more he talks, the more ridiculous this story is. Of course Noah's boat didn't capsize. It had metaphasic shields.
That's the true story. But as the legends go out, the size of the ark changes. You know, the type of wood that was used changes. The dimensions here.
Again, the Bible ripped off the Epic of Gilgamesh. So if anything, your Noah story is mundane among the many by your reasoning.
Everyone knows this could never work as an ark. Okay, but the biblical one can.
I know this is nitpicking, but didn't he mean dead? This isn't a hypothetical. This guy thinks this shit actually happened. And this is important to them for some reason. It didn't use any God magic. Now, flip the page and then tell them we can scientifically explain the curses from Exodus. They'll shut that shit down because that was clearly magic from an all-powerful dude.
But again, the basis of the Epic of Gilgamesh are the same as the Bible, okay?
Ooh, baby, get down, okay?
Chinese flood legend. Till the waters reached the sky and all the living beings perished, except two, a brother and a sister instead of a husband and wife here, who were saved in a huge chest. And they took with them into the chest a pair of every sort of animal, okay? Isn't that cool? I mean, every one of them have the basics.
It's no wonder that we have a ton of flood stories. Floods are frickin' terrifying. They happen all the time. Right now, my living room is in the middle of the 100-year floodplain, and there are flash flood warnings right now.
Things are changed, but the basics are still there.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
This is interesting. So this is apparently the word for boat in Chinese.
You know, I had a Chinese professor at university, and during Culture Week or some woke shit, he had a lecture on ideograms, and it was really funny because some tattoos don't say what people think they do. Teacher here is going to say because ancient symbols can accurately represent an idea.
The word vessel. This here is the word eight, and this here is the word for people.
Oh, I see why you're confused.
So the Chinese word for boat is a vessel with 8 people.
Dum-dum.
Yes?
You give me gum-gum.
I give you gum-gum?
This guy is an idiot. He breaks the symbol down into 3 parts, but is so dumb and doesn't think the number can change or the noun that it's talking about. I could just as easily say boat with 500 chickens. He thinks all boats have 8 people. He's a fucking idiot.
Isn't that interesting? This is just a little
This is a representation of various flood stories on the y-axis compared to about 20 common factors in Noah's flood story, while trying to look honest with those little half squares filled with red. I actually have the axis backward, and it's comparing regions, not individual stories, because some of these stories don't even have people in them. The idiot's need for a convoluted correlation table because it looks awesome is confusing.
Happen in them, and just showing all the things, all the similarities within the biblical story as opposed to the legends. Most of them have most of it, some of it doesn't mention this at all, some of them change this or that, but the point is all of them are a representation of the biblical idea.
Yes, the strings.
I saved the best for last because dude says stupid shit. It's going to really crescendo right here. He says that these airplanes were covered by millions of years of ice, and we know the exact date they were abandoned. I don't want to spoil it for you, but let's get into it.
Just real quick, this is as far as the ice, going back to the ice thing, they say it takes millions of years for the ice to build up. Layer, it's kind of like geology, the layers of rock.
What are you, a fucking geologist?
He's right, it ain't.
Well, what the hell is it then? Oh, horseshit.
There's layers in the ice, okay? And they believe each layer of ice represents however many thousands of years.
Hell, I'll explain it to you, Bobby. Every year it snows, and the snow underneath is compressed, and during this process, little bit of heat is released, and trapped air gets caught in these things called bubbles. Glaciers are kind of like slime molds and expand and contract, and they carve out the land as they move. The melting ice can cause these major rivers and floods that have carved up the landscape, and we can easily detect it.
Okay, this is a really cool, you can just look up the Lost Squadron once, and you'll get a kick out of this. So what happened was, in World War II, two planes had to land on the ice. I believe this was in Greenland.
2 planes? According to this creation site, it was 8 planes. And there's other sites like, no, it's definitely 6 planes. And then there's other sites like, no, for sure, it's 8 planes, right? And this is really irrelevant.
But I'm not sure.
Gang, I went and sifted through the interwebs, learning everything that I could know about these planes, and they were found 3 miles away from where most of them landed, and one of them crashed. How did these airplanes move over 3 miles and get covered with 250 foot of ice after only being snowed on for, 80 years?
And they couldn't take off again, so they had to walk away from the plane and just leave it there. And it just got left there for years, for decades. And then someone decided, you know what? We got those 2 planes sitting out there on top of the ice. Why don't we go over there, brush the dust, the ice off the wings, and fly it home?
While I was out there doing my research, this creation.com story kept popping up where this guy basically got all of his bullshit from. And he's not even up to date on what he's talking about.
And so they went out and they did a search for these things, and they could not find them. They couldn't find them. Where did they go? Well, they got some sonar and whatnot. You can get all the details in the article. But it turns out that the planes were 250 feet down in the ice. 250 feet.
This one's waited long enough.
Fun fact, the ice crushed most of them to the point that there wasn't any reason to even try to salvage them.
Like millions of years worth of ice.
Airplanes haven't existed for millions of years, so assuming that they were buried under millions of years of ice is kind of fucking retarded. I mean, there's no other way to say it. We know exactly when they crashed. We know exactly how far they moved from the time they crashed, but, it was millions of years of ice. Why? Because you're a fucking idiot?
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
They were down under within, this is probably 30 years later. Okay, they're down here, okay? So you can look that up. They drilled a hole all the way down.
But it's not on the ice. It's 2,000 feet below it.
You're looking at the best drilling team in the world. We'll shoot to that depth in 7 days.
In 2016, they thought about bringing up another plane, but the glacier is drifting towards the sea, and apparently these planes are over a huge crevasse that would make it too dangerous to extract any more of them. And dude's not even up to date on his own propaganda. You see, they brought up Glacier Girl one piece at a time, reassembled her, and she's on display in a museum somewhere. According to his logic, base camp should have been like 50 feet under the snow, maybe 75 feet under the ice, you know, because millions of years had went by since they found it and started excavating. If somehow you made it this far, leave me a middle finger in the comments section.